Oh. Giving all praise and honor to Yehovah, our God, who is the King of the universe. Hallelujah. And thanking him for allowing us to be here this day to worship before him. We thank him for our lives. We thank him for strength and good health. For he is the God that allows us to wake up this morning. And we woke up this morning, we had food to eat when we left when we left our homes. Food to eat when we got here. Food to eat when the break comes. Right, torah, yeah. Whenever that will be. Thank the Most High God for the life of Chief Kohat for storing for time this morning. So we ask that he will continue to be with all of us here this day. And to everyone I say Shabbat Shalom Lekem.
Shabbat Shalom Lekem.
So at this time we're going into the book of Genesis. Right. It's that time of the year once again. You know, time moves. Whether we want it to slow down, whether we want it to speed up, time moves.
That's right.
We just have to do what we're supposed to do and make sure that we're on time. We do thank the Most High God for allowing us once again to know that we are the children of Yisrael. Amen. We thank the Most High God for allowing us to know that he is God alone. We thank him for allowing us to know his commandments, his statutes, and his judgments. And we ask that he would be with us here this day. We ask for his presence to be among us. We ask for his presence to be among all of the gatherings of the children of Israel throughout the face of the earth. Amen. Wherever the word of God is being spoken this day, we ask that the Most High God would have his presence to be there. For we all want to acquire knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Yes, because that's what we need in order to survive. Amen. That's what we need in order to make progress in our lives. We have to make sure that we follow the commandments that the Most High God has taught us to live by. So the Most High God has given us his word. And in order to understand his word, we always have to go to the beginning. Right. So once again, we have come to that season once again where we go back to the beginning. We're reading in the book of Genesis called Bereshit in the Hebrew language. Bereshit, as it was said earlier, means in the beginning. Genesis is just English or going back, to a Greek word meaning origin. So we have to learn our origin. We have to learn the origins of the heavens and the earth. We don't know the origin of God because God has no origin. So when we begin reading, we don't read about the beginning of God. Because once again, God has no beginning and he has no end. Right. The heavens and the earth have a beginning. We as human beings, we have a beginning. But God lives forever. And that's why we serve the God that we serve, because he lives forever. And we thank him for allowing us to know that he lives forever. So we ask for, once again, his presence to be with us, that he would teach us this day, that he would allow us to all acquire knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, that he would inspire us to live in a righteous manner before him, that he would allow us to be holy, because he is a holy God. Everything that we need, we get from the Most High God. And as we begin to read, we see that the Most High God is the one that provides us with all things. So we ask that he would continue to shield us and protect us on this day. So we're going into the book of Genesis. I guess you could start at chapter 2 since Chief Kohat started 1 already. So now we're going to start from 1. We're going to do chapter 1. We're going to do chapter 1 again.
We're in the book of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 1. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
So right then, as reiterating what Chief Kohat also taught this morning, God only created the heavens and the earth. So when it comes to hell, when it comes to Sheol, when it comes to the underworld, we don't read about that in the Holy Scriptures. Because as it was said, that man made that up. Man made that up to scare other men, in thinking that after death, if you don't do right in life, that there's somewhere that you're going to go after you die that's not going to be pleasant. Right. But God judges people while they're alive, though. Right. We're going to read in this portion where God is judging people while they're alive. Right. God doesn't wait till people die to judge them. Right. He wants you to see his judgment, and he wants everybody else to see the judgment that he's putting forth. Yes, if he waits till put you in hell after you die, that doesn't scare anybody. Because people are happy being on earth doing what they want to do. They're not worried about what's going to happen after death. So we ask that the Most High God would continue to give us this wisdom. It also, once again, it doesn't state a beginning of God. So those that read this book already have the understanding of who God is. This book is not given to us to explain who God is. So you come with the understanding, knowing who God is, and then now we know that God created the heavens and the earth. And there was only one God that created the heavens and the earth. Because when some people try to overanalyze, so you go into the Hebrew and they see the word Elohim, and they think that it's plural, because there's other words that end with the same im sound for plural. But when it says bara Elohim, is he created. So it's one person that created the heavens and the earth. So it's not a bunch of people or a bunch of entities that created the heavens and the earth. There's not a God that controls the heavens and a God that controls the earth. It's not a God that controls the wind and a God that controls the sun. See, our way of life teaches us that one God can control all things. We as human beings, we need help. God doesn't need help. God saw that the man was alone, that we're going to read about. God was never lonely. God doesn't need anybody else. God doesn't even need us. But he created us to teach us that we need him. So as we read in what happened day by day, he's making a way for mankind. Mankind has to make a way for the word of God to come into the earth. So continue.
Now the earth was unformed and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the waters.
So what we're doing with the second verse, because what we're going to do, and not verse by verse, but what we're going to do as we go along is debunk some myths.
Okay.
So there's a myth out there that God is a spirit. But God can't be a spirit if the Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep.
Break it down, baby.
Think about that. It didn't say God hovered over the face of the deep, and then we say God is a spirit. The Spirit of God hovered over the face of the deep. So God is not a spirit. God created that spirit that hovered over the face of the deep. So now we're talking about a time where the earth was unformed. It was void. So now God is going to start to give it its form, start to give it its shape. Continue.
And God said, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw the light that it was good. And God divided the light from the darkness. And God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning, one day.
So first there was darkness. But in case we don't know who created the darkness, because it doesn't say who created the darkness, but we're going to go to Isaiah 45 and find out who created the darkness. We're going to go 45. We're going to start somewhere around verse 5.
I am Yahweh, and there is none else. Beside me there is no God. I have girded thee, though thou hast not known me, that they may know from the rising of the sun and from the west that there is none beside me. I am Yahweh, and there is none else. I form the light and create darkness. I make peace and create evil. I am Yahweh that doeth all these things.
So the God that we're talking about that created the heavens and the earth is the same God that created the darkness, the same God that created the light, the same God that created peace, the same God that created evil. So even though Chief Kohat may have said it and it may have gone over people's head, but he was saying that as a joke, but God is the one that created evil. Right. There is no devil. So we have to get that concept out of our mind that there's a God that controls good and that there's a devil that controls evil. Because God created both things. We're going back to the book of Genesis, but we read it 45. See, we have to read the Holy Scriptures in totality. God explains everything. So he's the one that does everything. So that's why when you actually get to the point where you start to believe in God and you start to see who he is, then we start to become a better people because we don't try to separate God from his creation. We serve a God that controls all things. Once again, as human beings, we need help. We need people, while you're putting up the wall, you need somebody to hold the wall up. Somebody would get the hammer. Somebody else would do that. God doesn't need somebody to hold the wall up. He holds the wall and puts the hammer up onto the wall at the same time. We the ones that need help. Continuing, going back to Genesis. So God created the darkness. He created the light. So now there's a cycle because we're going to see balance throughout God's creation as well. So we have darkness and we have light. And then with both of them together, that's how you have one day. And that's how, and so it says evening, there was evening and morning, there was one day. Because we don't follow the system of when it's 12 midnight, that's when a new day begins. See, when that's a system that was made so that we can tell time because we need to, as man populates, we need to tell time. But before there was clocks and things like that, people had, they woke up in the morning, did what they had to do, and went to sleep at night. But systems of making the hours, because they calculated everything, that there's 24 hours in a day. So therefore, using that system, now we can have clocks, you can tell time. But God is beyond time.
Okay.
Mankind sections the hours once again so that we can exist. But God didn't need those hours in order to create. So he created the darkness and he created the light. So there was evening and there was morning, and that consisted of one day. Continue.
Verse 6. And God said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament, and it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. And there were evening and there was morning, a second day.
So now the second day, because with the first day, all God created was light. The second day, the waters were still there. Of course, God made the waters. So the waters was there, and then God made a space between the waters. The space, or what they call firmament in the translation, is what's called the heavens. Right. So the heavens, just like how man made hell, and said that's a place where people go after they die, the heavens is what you see when you're alive. You don't see heaven when you die. Because God called the space between the waters the heavens. So when you look up into what they call the sky, that is the heavens. So you've been to heaven already if you've been in a plane. You've been to heaven already just by being on the second floor, because you're above the earth. Once you're above sea level, you've been in heaven. Don't wait till you die. So God has given us our heaven, our paradise already. We just have to make the most out of it while we're alive. Not wait till we die. Because nobody has died to come back and tell us anything. Ever. Even when I died, I didn't see anything when I died. So when I came back, I have nothing to tell you. Because it went black. But for those that know that story, know the story I'm talking about. I didn't see light. It went dark. I didn't see the light. I didn't see the heavens until I woke up. So I've been partly there. There's no stories for me to tell you about what happened over there. I woke up. I'd rather be here than where I was, but you know. But what God created was the heavens, which is the space between the waters. Right. So what they call space, what they call the sky, is the heavens. Amen. And that's what it is. Or what do you say, the heavens, or what do you say, heaven? That's what it is. So right at this point, you have waters above the heavens, we'll never get to that point of seeing those waters. And now there's waters underneath the heavens. And now we're going to go to the next day, and we're going to see what God does with the waters that are under the heavens. Continue.
And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together unto one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering together of the waters called he seas. And God saw that it was good.
So now, once again, the waters under the heavens, God caused those waters, and we're just going to basically explain it as it is. Teacher. So don't expect us to get into anything deeper than what we read here. So God caused the waters to gather together. The dry land appeared. That earth that was unformed and void before, that was somewhere in the midst of the waters, God caused that to appear out of the waters, and it appeared out of the waters dry. Only God can do that. Amen. So the earth or the ground came up, and God called that land earth. Or in Hebrew, that's the word eretz. So that's where we live right now. They call it the planet Earth. The ground that we walk upon is called eretz in the Hebrew, but that's earth. So the ground that you walk upon is the earth, and in the gathering of the waters, that's what God called the seas. Or some say seas, and some say oceans. Like you have the Atlantic Ocean, the Pacific Ocean, but those gatherings are what is the oceans, or what is called the seas. So it's simple, and when you look at the earth itself, you see, the globe, you see land, you see water. And that's what the globe is. And once again, God creates balance. So just like how he shaped the earth itself, and we'll wait till the fourth day to actually put all that together. But God is the one that formed the earth himself. So the ground that came up dry, that's what he called earth. And the gathering of the waters, he called the seas. Continue.
And God said, let the earth put forth grass, herb yielding seed, and fruit tree bearing fruit after its kind, wherein is the seed thereof upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth grass, herb yielding seed after its kind, and tree bearing fruit, wherein is the seed thereof after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening, and there was morning, a third day.
So now the third day is complete. So once again, what was done in the third day is that God caused the waters to gather together, which he called the seas, caused the dry ground to appear, which he called the earth. Then out of the earth, God caused all manner of trees and grass and herbs to grow out of the earth. And they were made with seeds. They had fruits, the fruits that were brought forth for some of the trees had seeds in them. And the seeds were for, of course, to reproduce. We're keeping it basic. We're not, trust me, we're not going there. Wherever it is that you think we may be going, we're not going there. So God made the seeds within these fruits in order for reproduction. Because God is only creating once. Amen. And God created a system of life that can reproduce forever. Right. We create things that do not last forever. They may last a long time, but they will not last forever. They need repairs. They need to be mended. They need to be soldered. They need to be put together. Bricks need to be pointed every now and then. God's earth doesn't need to be pointed. He made it in a fashion where it's going to exist forever. And he made everything within the earth that we need for generation to generation. Everything that is made now was already in the earth from thousands of years ago. So all the cars that they make today is not that they found some iridium somewhere else. God put all of those materials on earth that can be used generation after generation. Right. And the supply doesn't run out. Amen. Metal is not running out. Gold isn't running. They tell you gold may be running out. Gold is not running out. They just want to control the gold and the platinum so they can increase the price. But God put enough material on this earth to last forever. It's us as human beings and the life that he created that does not last forever. So God formed a system where the life can reproduce because the elements of the earth will be there forever. They don't need to reproduce, but life needs to reproduce. So God put the seeds within the fruits for reproduction. And he caused all of these things to grow out of the ground. And now we're going to go to that was the completion of the third day. And now we're going to go to the next day.
Verse 14. And God said, let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night. And let there be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. And let them be for lights in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day and the lesser light to rule the night and the stars. And God set them in the firmament of the heaven to give light upon the earth and to rule over the day and over the night and to divide the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good. And it was evening and it was morning, a fourth day.
So on the fourth day, what God did was made all the lights that are in the heavens. This, what we call the sun, the moon, and the stars. God created that on the fourth day. And where did he place the sun, the moon, and the stars? In the heavens. So you're seeing heaven already while you're alive. So once again, we're dispelling myths today. You look up in the heavens and you see the sun, the moon, and the stars. You didn't die to see the sun, the moon, and the stars. You didn't die to go to heaven. You woke up and you looked up. That's all that was required. So God made the great light, which we call the sun, which rules the day. So once again, now we see the entire system. Where we know today the sun is in the middle of the solar system, the earth, revolves around the sun, and there's a balance. So one part of the earth, there's light, the other part, there's darkness. But there's that balance because you need darkness and you need light. So whereas daytime here is nighttime on the other side of the earth. And when it becomes nighttime here, it becomes daytime on the other side of the earth. And God created a myriad of stars that we could never count and that all of us can't see at the same time. So you could be in the northern hemisphere, you'll see a group of stars. You go to the southern hemisphere, you're going to see a different set of stars. But God created all of that, and everything works together. And then you have the moon, which of course revolves around the earth, and then that connection between the sun, the moon, and the earth gives us our seasons. Because God made all of this, as it says, he made the light for signs, for seasons, for days, and for years. So now time can be told. Once again, God created all of these things on the fourth day. So God already had days mapped out before he made those signs in the heavens. Okay. Those signs in the heavens were made for us to tell time. God was already telling time. Because once again, these things were made on the fourth day. So you had 3 days that existed even before any of the hosts of the heavens were created. But now we can put everything together, and that's how we chart time, based on what God has put in the heavens above. Continue.
And God said, Let the waters swarm with swarms of living creatures, and let fowl fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven. And God created the great sea monsters, and every living creature that creepeth wherewith the waters swarm, after its kind, and every winged fowl after its kind. And God saw that it was good. And God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters in the seas, and let fowl multiply in the earth. And it was evening, and it was morning, a fifth day.
So on the fifth day, what God made was the creatures that live in the waters, or that roam in the seas, and the birds that fly where? In the heavens. So once again, we just trying to debunk a lot of the myths about heaven and hell. That's what we're doing here with the first chapter. You got the sun, the moon, and the stars in the heavens. You got birds flying through the heavens. So all of this stuff is when you're alive. So our lives are based on serving God while we are alive. And God will give us our judgment while we're alive. Amen. So God created all of the creatures that fly through the heavens and all the creatures that live in the waters and gave them the ability to reproduce. So the blessing that he gave to them is the fact that they are able to be fruitful and they're able to multiply in the waters and the birds can multiply and fly through the heavens. So God only had to create those creatures once and then those creatures reproduce. But of course, we know through the process of migration of certain animals, that's how you get what they would call the evolutionary process. So God didn't create, so to speak, and just to make sure to say this properly without blaspheming, every species was not created at one time. The species that we know of birds and fish and everything happened through a process of time based on their migrations. Just like when we get to human beings change based on their migration and their climate. So Chief Cole had already taught this portion, so I'll teach Noach right now. So when we get to the ark, Noach didn't have to bring all the species of animals that we know of today. These were just the origins. So he didn't need to bring the polar bear and the grizzly bear. He just needed to bring a bear. And the bears, when they came out the ark, generation after generation, migrated, and that's where you get the different species of the bears. So that's the understanding that we get. So sorry about that because Chief Cole did that, so I had to do that. So then next week you teach Lek Lekah. So going to the next day.
And God said, Let the earth bring forth the living creature after its kind, cattle and creeping thing and beasts of the earth after its kind. And it was so. And God made the beasts of the earth after its kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth upon the ground after its kind. And God saw that it was good.
So now these are all of the land animals. Whether they have 4 legs, 10 legs, 11, whatever amount of legs. These creatures are the land creatures or the land beasts that God made, and he gave them the ability to reproduce after their kind. Just like all the species of fish populate after or reproduce after their kind, the birds repopulate after their kind, all of the beasts of the earth populate after their kind. So you can't take a dog and a cat, mate them, and expect something to happen. You can have species of dogs that can reproduce, species of cats that can reproduce because they're the same kind. But you're not getting 2 totally different animals together thinking that you're going to make something. So you could put an elephant in the pen with a goat and nothing's going to happen. People try to do these things. But God already made the system perfect. Everything reproduces after its own kind. So birds, fish, land creatures, all reproducing after their own kind. Continue.
And God said, Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth.
So now with that verse, that's where some of the controversy comes into play. Because God said, let us make man. Yeah. But at this point, everything was created. Everything was done. So when God is saying, let us make man, and he makes man, or he makes humans, he makes them out of everything that he made on the earth. So if you consider the composition of the human body is the composition of the earth in proportion. So just like you have a certain proportion of water that's on the earth, so are our bodies. And that's why we need water and a good amount of water to survive. Okay. That's why, and also we're made out of the earth, so that's why the composition of the ground itself, you'll find the same composition in our bodies. All of the minerals that you get out of the earth is the same minerals that you find in the human body. So in order to in order to heal properly, people do things like take stuff out of the dirt, apply it to the human body, and that's how the human body heals. People get cuts, you could take the earth, put it on the cut, and the cut will heal. Today we live in, we're technologically advanced, so humans want to make, cortisone gel and different stuff like that. But back in the days, you just take some earth and then some mud, put it on cuts. Some people eat mud to get nutrition. Some people survive off of mud cakes, mud pies, off of dirt. So people, today say you see somebody eating dirt and look at them as they're crazy, but that's what human beings were doing back in the past, because that's where we got our nutrition from. So today, you're looking for your protein shakes and everything like that, but all of the minerals that's in the earth, that's good enough. So you can get some earth, put it in the blender, and you get the same thing as your shakes. So you're wasting money going to GNC when all you got to do is go to the backyard. So we just saved you like $20 a week right there. Just go to the backyard, get some dirt, put it in a NutriBullet with some water, and you're good to go for the day. And you get your protein, you get your minerals, you get everything that you need to survive. I mean, it's gross, it sounds funny today, but in reality, because God made the system so perfect, what sounds gross actually will work. And I'm not saying that based on experience, but it just will work. But that's what God is talking about when he's saying, let us make man. He's talking about everything, all of the elements that were already created. And then people look at the image and the likeness and think that, well, God must look like a human being. Human beings don't even look alike. So it's talking about something totally different. It's talking about emotions. It's talking about the dominion that God gave man over the earth, as God has dominion over the entire universe. Right. So there are attributes that humans have that God has. So those are the attributes that when it's talking about making man in the image and in the likeness, it's talking about the attributes. And then in the Hebrew, uses the word Shalom for image and Demut for likeness. You could go to chapters like Isaiah 39, where you see, we'll read, since Chief Court has stalled for time, we could stall for time too. So we have time to turn to some Isaiah 39, verse 7. In the Hebrew, you'll see the word Shalom, which is the word that's used for image in this verse. We'll actually start from 6, but the word Shalom is actually in 7.
The Hebrew?
Not in English, yeah.
Isaiah 39, verse 6?
6, yeah, start from 6.
Behold, the days come that all that is in thy house and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith Yahweh. You said Isaiah, right?
Yeah, my fault. I was about to blast you, but it's Psalms.
It's you, brother.
Psalm 39.
Psalms 39, brother?
Yeah, verse 7. I apologize for what I thought about you just now.
Behold, thou hast made my days as handbreadths, and my age is as nothing before thee. Surely every man at his best estate is altogether vanity. Surely man walketh as a mere semblance. Surely for vanity they are in turmoil. He heapeth up riches and knoweth not who shall gather them. So when it says, surely man walketh as a mere semblance, when you look at the Hebrew translation, what they translate as mere semblance is the word Shalom. Because it's showing that man is just walking as a comparison to something else. So all of our days are vanity, according to the Psalm, they talk about vain people and how our lives are vain. But it's just giving a comparison, not saying that that a certain individual looks exactly like another individual, but the ways are similar. So when it said that surely man walks as a mere semblance and uses the word Shalom, it's saying that basically it's comparing one person to another person. Now the word demut, which they translate to likeness, we're going to go to Psalm, not Isaiah, Psalm 58. And that should be verse 7. No. 58, verse 5. Their venom is like the venom of a serpent. They are like the deaf ass that stoppeth her ear.
So now, to see who we're talking about, go to verse 4.
The wicked are estranged from the womb. The speakers of lies go astray as soon as they are born.
So when it says in verse 5, their venom is like the venom of a serpent, is like, in the Hebrew, it uses the word demut. Evil people don't have venom. But the word demut is just saying that their attributes or what they bring forth, the evil people and the liars, what they bring forth is as venom. So now we're going back to Genesis. So when it says the image and the likeness, is comparing the attributes of mankind to the attributes that God has. So God loves, we love. God hates, we hate. God gets happy, we get happy. God gets angry, we get angry. So the image and the likeness is talking about the attributes that God has, and also the fact that God has dominion over the entire universe, and he has given us dominion over the earth. So God is not talking to another God when he's saying, let us make man in our image and our likeness. He's talking to the elements that he has made, and the image and the likeness is not that we look like God, but our ways can be like God. Continue. Back in the book of Genesis.
Verse 27. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them.
Now, unfortunately, we had to go to all the verses in order to explain that. But verse 27, if people just want to read it for what it is, it said God created man in his image and his likeness. Sometimes the simple answer is not always, doesn't always work. So sometimes we have to go around the bush, so to speak, to explain a point. But verse 27 explained that God by himself made man in his image and in his likeness. So that really explains everything. Without having to go to the Psalms and any of the verse that mentioned image and likeness, God by himself created man in his image and in his likeness, and made male and female. So males are not the only ones created in the image of God. Females are created in the image of God as well. Now, this doesn't sound good to those that are what they call chauvinists, but both male and female are made in the image of God. So therefore, we have an equality among the genders in the sight of God. A righteous man is not going to, no, a wicked man is not going to be better than a righteous woman. Righteous people are what God looks at. So whether it's male or female, our righteousness is what God looks at. So male and female are the same in the sight of God. So unfortunately, that doesn't sound good to everybody, but verse 27 said that male and female, he created them in the image of God. So I know, and also this is Domestic Violence Month, Awareness Month, so this may not be good for those that like to domestically violate women, but male and female are the same. This concept of one gender over the other didn't come from the Holy Scriptures. It comes from those that misinterpreted the Holy Scriptures. Continue.
And God blessed them, and God said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that creepeth upon the earth. And God said, behold, I have given you every herb yielding seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree in which is the fruit of the tree yielding seed. To you it shall be for food, and to every beast of the earth, and to every fowl of the air, and to everything that creepeth upon the earth, wherein there is a living soul, I have given every green herb for food. And it was so.
So God gave all of the herbs, all of the trees, all of the fruit from the trees, all of the vegetables as we call them today, God gave them to mankind to eat for food. And that's how we get our nourishment. And that's why, once again, going back to the earth, we can get nourishment from it. We can eat, we can get our medicine from the earth. A lot of things that we need in order to survive come from the earth itself. It's just that when we live in a society that is so, or what they call medically advanced, they bypass some of the simple things that can heal. So something simple as the black cumin seed, which we know is the black seed, which they make the black seed oil out of, which cures basically everything except, they say everything except death. God created that out of the earth. So sometimes all we have to do is just go back to what God made in order to be healed. So the cortisone short shot may have worked, but there were other things that God made that could naturally heal us that won't raise or cause other problems in us. Sometimes, like you watch commercials for medication, and it's, it says, you get medication that, can that can basically, cure the common cold. But it said just beware, it could cause blindness, it could cause impotence, it could cause your limbs to fall off. All you want to do is cure your cold. You sneezing and you want to get something to stop the sneezing, and all of a sudden you can become impotent just by, so I mean, just for fixing a cold. So I mean, sometimes you gotta weigh which one. Do you want impotent or you want to keep sneezing? So, I think most of us want to just keep sneezing. Or like, as some of the commercials say, or even death. All that just to stop sneezing or to cure a fever. But get some black seed oil. You ain't got to worry about impotence. You ain't got to worry about a limb falling off. It'll cure your common cold and more. So sometimes we just got to go back to what God gave us in order for our healing. And it was so. Continue.
And verse 31. And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And it was evening, and it was morning, the sixth day.
So now we have, those of us that know the scripture know that we have come to the completion of creation. So God made everything in 6 days. So from the first day where he made light up until the sixth day where he made mankind, all of that was created within those 6 days. And God put within life the ability to reproduce after his own kind. So humans have to mate with humans in order to make humans. So when we get to chapter 6, the interpretation that people have in chapter 6 would be contrary to what we read in chapter 1. Because only humans could beget humans. Just like the animals, they beget after their own kind. The fishes beget after their own kind. Birds beget after their own kind. So now we're going to chapter 2.
And the heaven and the earth were finished, and all the hosts of them. And on the seventh day, God finished his work, which he had made. And he rested on the seventh day from all his work, which he had made. And God blessed the seventh day and hallowed it, because that in it he rested from all his work, which God in creating had made.
So that's where we get the framework of a week. There was 6 days of creation. Then God ceased from work on the seventh day. And that's where you get the term Sabbath or Shabbat in Hebrew, which means he ceased. So God ceased from all work. There was no creation that was done on the seventh day. There was no work performed by God on the seventh day. So therefore, that's why we are commanded not to do any work on the seventh day. So that's why we are in places like this, gathering before the Most High God, because we did not go to work and we did not do any work on the seventh day. And this day is so important that it's in the 10 Commandments. We're going to go to the 10 Commandments and read about this day, because many people say they keep the 10 Commandments, but skip over certain of them. But within the 10 Commandments in Exodus chapter 20, there's the Sabbath day mentioned in verse 8.
Remember the Shabbat day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work. But the seventh day is a Shabbat unto Yahweh thy God. In it thou shalt not do any manner of work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, nor thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days Yahweh made the heaven and the earth, the sea and all that in them is, and rested on the seventh day. Wherefore Yahweh blessed the Shabbat day and hallowed it.
And that's within the 10 Commandments once again. So you can't say you're keeping the 10 Commandments and not keeping the Sabbath day holy. You can honor your father and your mother as you're supposed to, not murder like you're supposed to, not commit adultery like you're supposed to, not steal like you're supposed to, not take God's name in vain like you're supposed to, not covet anything that belongs to anybody like you're supposed to, not worship any other gods like you're not supposed to worship any other gods, or lie to anybody, or bear false witness like you're supposed to. But none of that is important if you're not keeping the Sabbath day. You have to keep the Sabbath day also. So we can't pick the commandments that we want to keep and ignore the other ones. So in order for us to be righteous individuals, we have to keep all of the commandments of God. So that includes not going to work and school and things like that on this day. And we're commanded to make sure that our food preparation, when you go to Exodus 16, we're not going to, but if you read Exodus 16, in preparation for the Sabbath day, you bake and you boil prior and leave that food over for the Sabbath day. In Exodus chapter 35, it said, do not kindle any fire in your habitations on the Sabbath day. In Isaiah, it mentions that we're not supposed to follow our own pleasures on the Sabbath day. So the Sabbath day is very important for us. And so we don't do any cooking on this day. We don't boil, we don't bake. And just for those that were watching, and it seemed like, Chief Koha was getting a hot cup of coffee, because we would look on the screen, it looked like that. In this room, it didn't. So for those that were watching, that was not a hot cup of coffee that Chief Court had. That it was just water. It just seemed like it would, I know the way he was drinking it, from looking on the screen, it just looks like that. But we don't do those type of things on the Sabbath day. This day is a holy day unto the Most High God. He blessed this day and made this day holy. Amen. And then it comes every seventh day. And the system is laid to where we already understand when the Sabbath day comes in. In an English-speaking country where they call the seventh day Saturday, we may not understand that this is the Sabbath day. Amen. But speak any other language, and you understand that this day is the Sabbath day. And we go through this all the time. Spanish, they call this day Sábado, which means Sabbath. In Latin, it's Sabato, which means Sabbath. In the Akan language, which is the people that live in Ghana, who most of them can trace their lineage to the land of Israel. But when you go to the 7 days of the week, actually, being that we completed the 7 days of creation, when you go to the Akan language or the Twi language, what the days of the week represent to them is actually what was created on the 6 days. And then on the seventh day, it's called Memenada, which means God's rest day. So when we speak another language, then we get the understanding of this. But when we speak in English, that's when you start to get all types of concepts of when the Sabbath day occurs. Some people say it's based on charting the moon, which when the heavens and earth were created, the moon was created on the fourth day. You had 3 days before the moon. So the Sabbath day can't be based on the moon. Some people come up with crazy ideas of when the Sabbath day is, but speak another language. You don't even have to go to Hebrew. Speak another language, and you'll automatically understand that from generation after generation, this day that they call Saturday is the Sabbath day. Okay. We don't need to go far. Sometimes, like I said, we just have to understand things simply as it's given unto us. Amen. Amen. So God has given us this day to cease from our work, and that's how we get our blessing. We're going back to Genesis. God blessed this day, so in order for us to receive a true blessing in life, we have to keep God's day holy. That's where our blessings come from, by obeying the word of God. Continue.
Verse 4. These are the generations of the heaven and of the earth when they were created in the day that Jehovah God made earth and heaven.
So now when it said that these are the generations of the heavens and the earth, this is now going to another explanation of how the heavens and the earth were created. Right. So this is not the eighth day, and then now you have another story taking place. These are the generations of the heavens and the earth, and we know that the heavens and the earth don't have generations. The word toldot, which is the Hebrew word in that verse, means history. Okay. So now we're talking about the history of the heavens and the earth when they were created. Okay. So now we're going to get a better understanding what was done on the initial days. Because basically chapter 1 just gave us an outline. Sometimes you just have that first chapter of the book that just outlines what the overall theme of the book is about. And then you get to the later chapters, which actually explains the content that, expands the content that was initially explained in the first chapter. And that's exactly what was done here, that in the first chapter, all it did was give you what happened day by day. And now with the history of the heavens and the earth, now we're going to get an understanding of what was actually done when the heavens and the earth were created. And also in this verse, we see this is the first time that the name of God is actually mentioned. So now you hear the reader, Chief Mekubadiah, say Yehovah. In your book, it says Lord. Because in all of the places where in most of our books where it says L-O-R-D in capital letters is actually the name of God in those books. In those verses. That's why you have certain books that they don't put Lord, they put God's name there. So you find an English version that they'll put Jehovah instead of Lord, because they know that in the Hebrew text, which is the original text of the Holy Scriptures, that's where the name of God is written. And the letters of God's name is the Yod, Hey, Wow, Hey. And when you take those letters and put them in English characters, that's where you see YHWH. So that's why here we pronounce it as Yehovah. And you'll hear people pronounce the name of God as Yahweh. But that is the name of God, because you don't have the vowels in there. So that's why the pronunciations may be different. But we understand who we're talking about when we say Yehovah or when we say Yahweh, because we're going by the consonants of YHWH. And in the English, when time went on, they pronounced words that begin with the letter Y as the letter J. So that's how instead of Yehovah, you have people that say Jehovah. Or for Yahweh, you'll hear people say Javeh, because also for the W sound, you'll hear it pronounced as a V sound. Just like, we hear the tribe of Lewi, some people say the tribe of Levi. But it's actually the tribe of Lewi, because that Y or that W sound is what it is. But as time went on, they started pronouncing the Y as a V. But that came through the advent of the English language coming from the original Latin as time went along. So this is where the name of God is. So now we know the name of God. So now when we're praying, we know who we're supposed to be praying to. Now when we talk about the creation of the heavens and the earth, we know who created the heavens and the earth. So if anybody's talking about any other God beside Yehovah, that's not the God that created the heavens and the earth. And if you're not praying to the God that created the heavens and the earth, then that God can't do anything for you.
There you go.
So we have to go to the source, the one that created mankind, the one that made the trees and made the everything out of the ground for us to live by. That's the source of life.
There you go.
So in order for us to live as righteous human beings, we have to go to the source of life, which is Yehovah. Or if you pronounce the name Yahweh, then the source of life is Yahweh. But if you name anyone else, that's not God. So God or Yehovah is the one that ceased from work on the seventh day, and that's why we cease from our work on this day. So now we're going into the generations of the heavens and the earth in the day that we created. Continue.
Verse 5. No shrub of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up. For Yehovah God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. But there went up a mist from the earth, and watered the whole face of the ground.
So once again, remember, we're going back to when there were no shrubs on earth. So we're going back to the first chapter, to the third day when there was nothing growing out of the ground. And it said because man was not made to till the earth. Because man was not made until the sixth day. So in order for the ground to be nourished, God caused the mist to come up out of the ground to water the ground in order to nourish the ground until he created man to actually take care of the earth. So once again, we're not going into the eighth day. We're going back to the first 6 days, and we get an explanation of what took place during those 6 days. So when it says that man was created on the sixth day, male and female, the male and female that we're going to read about in this chapter, what is the male and female that was spoke about in chapter 1? Right. Because we're dispelling another myth about Adam and Lilith and all these other people that were created before this scenario took place. God created Adam, and he created his wife, as we're going to read about right now on the sixth day. Continue.
Then Yehovah God formed man of the dust of the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. And Yehovah God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put the man whom he had formed. And out of the ground made Yehovah God to grow every tree that is pleasant to the sight and good for food. The tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. So
now, once again, so just to keep it interactive, we said that God created good and evil. So he created the tree of life. What did God create also? And life. So God made life as he made the tree of life. So if God created the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, then who created the knowledge of good and evil? Pretty simple. So there's no other entity that controls evil because God made both. We read in Isaiah 45, he made both. He made the tree which possessed the knowledge of good and evil, which is both. So God is in control of both of them. Continue.
And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from thence it was parted, and became 4 heads. The name of the first is Pishon. That is it which compasseth the whole land of Havilah, where there is gold. And the gold of that land is good, and there is bdellium and the onyx stone. And the name of the second river is Gihon. The same is that which compasseth the whole land of Cush. And the name of the third river is Tigris. That is it which goes toward the east of Ashur. And the fourth river is the Euphrates.
So now let's try to get, the map in our minds, because I didn't bring the 600 slides that we were going to have. But we know what the map looks like. So the first river, Pishon, encompassed the entire land of Havilah, which some people say is Saudi Arabia. Right. And there was gold in that land, and the gold of the land is good, and there was bdellium and onyx. The name of the second river is the Gihon, and it's the same which compasses the whole land of Cush. Now, when you think of the land of Cush, what do you think about? Think about Ethiopia. So we don't think about England. We don't think about Germany. We don't think about Ireland. We don't think about Armenia. We don't think about Russia. So now when we start thinking about where the origins of mankind comes from, we see lands such as Havilah, we see lands of Cush, then we start thinking about Africa. Right. We don't start thinking about Europe. So when we start thinking about where the origins of mankind come from, when we start thinking about the origins of the Holy Scriptures itself, we start to see people that look like other people in this room, and not the people that we're taught to what they look like. Exactly. So when you start seeing pictures of the first man, the picture of the first man that you see out there doesn't look like the dirt that man was created out of. It looked like he was made out of snow. But there was no snow in Cush. There was no snow in how we live. God didn't make man out of snow. He made man out of earth. So out of the dirt, therefore, man is going to look like the dirt that he was made out of, because God does things simply. God is majestic. He does things majestically. But when he creates, he works, he does things with simplicity as well. So he made man out of the dust of the earth. So the man is going to look like the dust of the earth. So a lot of the pictures, once again, that we see are not the description of what the first man and woman look like. So therefore, we have to get certain concepts out of our mind. And once we put the proper concepts in, then we start to get a pride of ourselves. Because it didn't take until they made the Black Panther movie for black people to start feeling proud about themselves. Or proud about themselves. But it shouldn't have waited till 2018 for that to happen. We've been reading the Holy Scriptures for generations, so we should have pride in ourselves just by reading the book that God gave us, because we should see the imagery of ourselves within the same book that we read. So we're reading about the lands of Hawila, the land of Cush. We're reading about the Tigris, the third river, which goes to the land of Ashur, which is the land of Assyria, which is the land which is next to Babylon. And the Tigris River still exists running through Iraq today. And the fourth river, which is the river Euphrates, which is the same river that is flowing in Iraq today. So now we start to get an idea, once again, of where the Garden of Eden is. And remember, the river went into the garden, and it came out at 4 rivers. So God nourished that garden with one river. That garden, or the river, went into the garden and had 4 rivers come out of it. So now we get an idea or a concept of where the Garden of Eden is, and it's nowhere near England. Continue.
And Jehovah God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it. And Jehovah God commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden thou mayest freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil thou shalt not eat of it. For in the day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die.
So now, verse 15. Jehovah God took the man and put him into the Garden of Eden to dress and keep it. Man was not made in the Garden of Eden.
Right.
Man was made outside of the Garden of Eden, and God took that man and put him in the Garden of Eden. Because once again, we start read it plainly for what and that's the concept that we always say all the time. Read on the lines, not between the lines, because between the lines is nothing but white space. If you start reading the white space, and you start thinking that man was made in the garden. Reading on the lines in the black part, see, the black part is what's important here. So we have to keep it black. So you read the black part, it says that God took man and put him in the garden. That's what it says. So we're taught that man was made in the garden, man was made outside the garden, and put inside the garden to take care of the garden. So, here you hear the concept, you only had one job. Because that's when somebody had one job and they messed it up. And we're going to see where this one job gets messed up. All the man had to do was till the garden. Everything else took care of itself. God caused water to come up out of the ground. Stuff was growing. One job, till it. And one commandment, don't eat of one particular tree. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We can eat apples all we want. Ain't nothing wrong with an apple. Because also they give us a description of the tree of knowledge of good and evil as an apple. Like that's the only fruit that God ever made. Right. We don't know what that fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil looks like, but it definitely was not an apple. Because God made various fruits. Oranges look like oranges, pears look like pears, every fruit looks different. So therefore the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil did not have to look like an apple. And that's because when men start to try to imagine stuff, they imagine only what they could think of. But God's imagination or his thoughts are far beyond that of mankind. So we would never know what the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil looks like, but it definitely was not an apple. Continue.
And Jehovah God said, it is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helpmeet for him.
So once again, God saw it was not good that the man be alone. God could be by himself. God doesn't need help.
Right.
So God didn't say it's not good that I'm alone. God said it's not good that the man be alone, so he's going to make a help meet for him. Someone that match him. Someone that complements him. Because when that's the kenegdo, Azia kenegdo, which is the term in Hebrew, is someone that's going to help him and that matches him. Or a kenegdo, sometimes an opposing view can help you. So when God is going to make the help, what they translate as help meet for him, is someone to help him meet his obligations. Help him do what he's supposed to do. So therefore, where he's lacking, his help is going to be there for him. And where the help is lacking, the man is going to be there for his help. Continue.
And out of the ground Yahweh God formed every beast of the field and every fowl of the air, and brought them unto the man to see what he would call them. And whatsoever the man would call every living creature, that was to be the name thereof. And the man gave names to all cattle, and to the fowl of the air, and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helpmeet for him.
And people need to learn that today. You don't find your help from the goats. You don't find your help from the cows. You don't find your match by going to the farm. Because out of all of the creatures that God made, God also said that there was no help found for him there. So therefore, men are supposed to leave animals alone. You raise beasts to help you do stuff in the field, but the beast is not your helpmeet. That's not who God made to complement you. So once again, people need to learn that, because people mate with beasts today, but God didn't make beasts to mate with mankind. Because out of everything that God created out of the ground, none of that was good for Adam. Continue.
And Yahweh God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. And he took one of his ribs and closed up the place with flesh instead thereof. And the rib which Yahweh God had taken from the man made he a woman, and brought her unto the man. And the man said, This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man.
So everything God made, God formed, he created out of the earth, God built a woman for man. So God took special care in constructing, because he uses the word built, he constructed this woman for the man, and took one of his sides or one of his ribs to create the woman. He didn't take his backbone. So men are still supposed to still have their backbone. He took the rib, he took the side. But for some... I was trying to time sheet, but it... So the man still had his backbone. That's the moral of this. The man still out of everything that God took out of the man to make the woman, the man still had his backbone. And the woman was made out of his side, so she's still there by his side, not to hold him up erect because he had his own backbone. So therefore, they are one, because God made one from the other one. But when God initially made man, therefore all of the elements was within that one individual. What God did was take a part of that individual and construct another individual that will still be able to match with that other person. Right. So now you have man and now you have woman, because you need both in order to have reproduction. And once again, we go through this every year. Even through inanimate objects, you have male and female. Plugs, they call male. The outlets, they call female. Because in order for things to work, you need the male to plug into the female. Right. And that's how, like when you plug your phone into the wall to get juice, men plug into women, and that's how you get reproduction. That's exactly where the concept came from. So therefore, these concepts are still there. Once again, throughout inanimate objects, they still call it male and female. You need male and female in order to have anything reproduce on this earth. So God didn't make another male for the first man. Right. He made a female for the first man. So there was no matches made from the animals, and there was definitely not a match made from another male, because God didn't make another male. He made the female to match with the male, and that's how you have reproduction. That's how now the man can't feel complete. So he looks at the woman, he says, now this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Because when he looked at the giraffe, that was not bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. He looked at the cow, he looked at the goat, that was not bone of his bone and flesh of his flesh. So it wasn't until God presented him with the woman, now he's comfortable. So now he's no longer lonely, because now he has someone to match him. And that's like what Chief Kohad was saying earlier, that we're not supposed to have any stress. So you don't have your mate stress you. You're supposed to be complete when you have a mate, not get stressed. When you get stressed along with your mate, and that goes for both male and female. So when you're looking for a mate, you're not looking for stress to come along with it. You're looking for a match, someone to complete you, not someone to tear you down. Because now Adam could fulfill his job, because his job is to till the earth or to work the garden. Now he has help in that job. And once again, this is someone that is compatible with him to help him with the job. And this is not someone that's of a weaker species of him, because both male and female were created in the image of God. Just like when we look for help, today, as human beings, we look for someone to help us do what we got to do. So that person has to have the capabilities to help us do what we got to do. When you want help in fixing your car, you don't go to someone that doesn't know how to fix cars. You go to someone that has the strength of mind to help you fix the car. The experience, and that person could be better than you, but you still say that person helped you with that job. Those that lift weights, when you get a spotter to help you, you would hope that the spotter is stronger or just as strong as you. Your help should not be weaker than you. So therefore, once again, that concept of the female being the weaker species is a concept that comes from somewhere else. Help is supposed to help you. So help is supposed to be as strong or stronger than you. Once again, you don't get help from somebody weaker than you. Else you could do the job yourself. Else you wouldn't need a spotter if you wouldn't need a spotter, or if you could do it by yourself. You'd be able to build a house by yourself. But your help has to have the same experience, as Chief Uziel mentioned, experience and strength as you do. Continue.
Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they shall be one flesh, and they were both naked, the man and his wife, and were not ashamed.
Now, verse 24 brings out an interesting concept, because this was something, when the writer wrote this was something that was happening during this time, which is something that's not happening during this time. But when a man takes on a wife, he leaves his father and his mother and cleaves unto his wife, and they become one flesh. So that's for, message definitely for the younger people. You don't find your mate, and the mate is still living with his or her parents' house. They're supposed to come out of the house, form their own house, because that was a tradition that was formed. So therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother, cleave unto his wife, and they become one flesh. So therefore, when looking for mates, we're looking for help. We're looking for someone that can help us do what we got to do, and you want someone that you can live with. Your parents will be there for guidance. In the case of, when you have land, we would live in the land, people would live on the land of the fathers, but there's still a separate household that was still constructed for the two to live in. So that's the process. Once again, that changes today, but the initial concept was a man should leave his father and his mother, cleave to his wife, and they become one flesh. Not send her back, or he goes back to his parents' house, and yet they're still married. Continue.
Chapter 3, hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
Now the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Jehovah God had made. And he said unto the woman, Yea, hath God said, Ye shall not eat of any tree of the garden? And the woman said unto the serpent, Of the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God hath said, Ye shall not eat of it, neither shall ye touch it, lest ye die. And the serpent said unto the woman, Ye shall not surely die. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as God, knowing good and evil. So
now we start talking about this serpent, which is also another controversial figure in the Holy Scriptures, because people make the serpent controversial when the serpent himself was not controversial. Because it said that the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field which Jehovah God had made, which means that the serpent was a beast, and that God made the beast. This beast was just more cunning or more subtle than the other beasts that were made. But this was not a separate entity or an entity that represents evil. This was a serpent that God created. And the serpent had the ability to communicate with humans. And it doesn't mean that other beasts didn't have the ability to communicate with humans also. It's just that for this part of the story, all we're focused on is the communication between the serpent and the woman, and the serpent with mankind. But we don't know what else was happening. We're just focusing on one particular part of the story, which does not need to be expanded beyond what we read here. So now the serpent is trying to trick, or is tricking the woman into eating of the fruit, because he's conversing with her, asking about what you can and cannot eat. But we know based on the story that the woman knows what she can and cannot eat. The man knows what he can and cannot eat. So obviously the serpent also knew what they were not supposed to be eating. But he's trying to trick her into eating of the fruit and telling her things that may be appealing to her mind in order to get her to eat from the fruit. Continue.
And when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof, and did eat. And she gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of them both were open, and they knew that they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves girdles.
So both of them ate of the fruit, and that's where the problem came from. They both ate the fruit together, because it says specifically that the woman gave to her husband with her. So the husband was there with her when she ate the fruit. So we were taught, or the misinterpretation is that the woman tricked the man into eating the fruit. The man was right there. The man knew what the fruit looked like, and he knew what he was not supposed to eat.
Right.
So the man was there with the woman. So whatever conversation they had it there together. And that's where the problem came in, because, and we're going to see through the punishments, that's when God starts to make a difference between one and the other. But we were speaking earlier, it's just in the creation that male and female were created in the image of God. The separation comes via the punishment. But that punishment doesn't put a big gap in the difference between male and female either. Continue.
And they heard the voice of Jehovah God walking in the garden toward the cool of the day. And the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of Jehovah God amongst the trees of the garden. And Jehovah God called unto the man and said unto him, Where art thou? And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid, because I was naked, and I hid myself. And he said, Who told thee that thou wast naked? Hast thou eaten of the tree whereof I commanded thee that thou shouldest not eat?
So once their eyes became open, they realized that they were naked. They started to clothe themselves. They took the fig leaves, based on unless there's some external research, based on certain research, figs only grow in a certain climate. So once again, we're focusing on a certain region.
Right.
So where they depicting people that look different than what Adam and Eve was supposed to look like, figs don't grow in those areas. So so if they got fig leaves, they have to get fig leaves from where fig trees are growing. And there's a specific climate for that, which matches the lands where the rivers that we spoke about earlier flow out of. So if today they're saying that man was created somewhere else and fig trees don't grow there, then something must be wrong. Completely wrong. Continue.
And the man said, The woman whom thou hast gave it to be with me, she gave me of the tree, and I did eat.
So now with the knowledge of good and evil, you get the knowledge of knowing how to pass blame. Because now the man is blaming God for him eating of the fruit. Because he's basically saying, if you didn't give me this woman, I wouldn't have eaten this fruit. So the man was given a command not to eat the fruit. He knew what the fruit looked like. He knew what he was not supposed to eat. But with knowledge of good and evil, now he's blaming God for the woman that he gave him, when the man was the one that was lonely and God was looking out for the man and gave him someone to help him. Now the man is blaming God for sin or disobeying the word of God. Continue.
And Jehovah God said unto the woman, What is this that thou hast done? And the woman said, The serpent beguiled me, and I did eat. And Jehovah God said unto the serpent.
Yeah, because from there, God is just going to speak to the serpent. Because so far nobody's taking the blame for themselves. Everybody's blaming somebody else. And that's a lesson that we have to learn, that when we do wrong, just like we just came from the Day of Atonement, we make our confession to God for the things that we have done. And that wasn't what was done here. All they're doing is passing the blame to somebody else. And that doesn't fix the problem. The punishment will fix the problem that God is going to speak about afterward. That will clear everything up. But things may have been different if they owned up to their responsibilities. If the man just came out and said, I was wrong, things might have been different. Might have been. We don't know that, but things might have been different. If the woman just came and said she was wrong, things might have been different. But God doesn't even need to question the serpent. He just goes straight to the serpent and tells the serpent what's going to happen to him. Continue.
And Jehovah God said unto the serpent, Because thou hast done this, cursed art thou from among all cattle, and from among all beasts of the field. Upon thy belly shalt thou go, and dust shalt thou eat all the days of thy life. And I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. They shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise their heel.
Now, in regards to the serpent's punishment, like what are some of the concepts that we know about this particular serpent? Like what happened? Not what you believe, but just what you heard out there of what the serpent is. Anybody? The serpent was naked. It was the devil, fallen angel. So naked, devil, fallen angel. But yet, the punishment was that the serpent would crawl on his belly. The fallen angel, or if it was a fallen angel, the fallen angel didn't get punished. If it was the devil didn't get punished. If he was naked, he didn't get clothed. So God punishes people for what they do. So if the serpent is punished for what the serpent did, then the serpent is the serpent. It's a beast. Because the only one that got punished for this is the serpent. not a fallen angel, and not the devil. So therefore, this serpent could not be a fallen angel. It could not be the devil. And the naked part, that's a whole different story. But it couldn't have been any of those things because God punished the serpent. And serpents, how do they travel today? They crawl in their bellies. So therefore, the serpent that we were speaking about in the garden is the same serpent that we see crawling on their bellies today, and not the concepts that we were taught. Once again, just keeping it plain and just keeping it simple. Continue.
Unto the woman he said, I will greatly multiply thy pain and thy travail. In pain thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee.
So now, if women have a problem with the pain of childbirth, it's the first woman's fault. It's not like, I know Uziel might have heard some screams in the hospital. It was not his fault that she had pain in delivering the child. She had to go back in her history through her mitochondrial DNA and curse out the first woman, and not Chief Uziel. For any wife that had pain in childbirth, it's not the husband's fault. Go back in your mitochondrial DNA and curse that first woman, because that's the reason why you have pain in childbirth. And that's why, as I say, I will greatly multiply thy pain and thy travail, and the pain thou shalt bring forth children, and thy desire shall be to thy husband, and he shall rule over thee. And that concept of the ruling now, because both of them, there was no, so to speak, rulership in terms of somebody listening to the other person. Because both of them had equal say. That's why both of them ate of the fruit, because there was no conversation of just trying to figure out what we should do. Now God is making it clear who's going to have the rulership of the household, and that the woman's desire shall be to her husband, and the husband shall rule over him. Because now you have to have someone that has a final say-so or a decision-making process in the household. Just like you have on sports team, there's someone that everybody on the team has to answer to. In a corporation, there's someone in the corporation that all of the employees have to answer to. So now in a household, God made it so that there's someone in the household that everybody else answers to. And once again, because it sounds good, men actually, like this part. They pound their chests, in the back, everybody, every man is putting a foot on the scale to see whose foot is heavy in the house. But when the door opens up, everybody puts feather foot. But, everybody likes this part. But God is speaking to the woman. Yeah. This is not a blessing for the man. No. This is a punishment for the woman, because God is speaking directly to the woman. So the man actually didn't earn this position. So sometimes when you don't earn a position, we could accept the position, but don't act like you earned the position. The position was acquired because she messed up. Exactly. And God is speaking to the woman and not to the man at this point. Continue.
And unto Adam he said, because thou hast hearkened unto the voice of thy wife, and hast eaten of the tree of which I commanded thee, saying, thou shalt not eat of it. Cursed is the ground for thy sake, and toil shalt thou eat of it all the days of thy life. Thorns also and thistles shall it bring forth to thee, and thou shalt eat the herb of the field. In the sweat of thy face thou shalt eat bread, till thou return unto the ground. For out of it wast thou taken. For dust thou art, and unto dust shalt thou return.
So now, along with that position that was acquired, comes increased work. Oh, yeah. Things are not going to be easy. No. So whereas before the man, all he had to do was just go trim a couple of limbs and stuff like that, take care of everything, now he actually has to work. So just because he plants something doesn't mean that what he plants automatically is going to grow. Now, God is definitely involved in our work, because we have to pray to God in order to be successful, because it's not going to be easy. So when a man is working the ground, thorns may come up and not what he wanted. Yeah. Or you just like, try to get to a rose, you have to go through the thorns. Yeah. When you're planting certain crops, you may have weeds and stuff that come and affect the crops. So God is saying that now the earth is cursed for man's sake. So now it's not going to be easy. So the food that we have to acquire to eat is not going to be as easy to get anymore. Okay. And that's the punishment that we have to bear. So just like the woman has to go to her predecessor to curse for her punishment, the males have to go to our predecessor to curse for our punishment. But it's not going to be easy, and this is something that we just have to do. We got to work hard and in order to produce. And that's what God has made the system, so that when he's working, he's planting, thorns and thistles may come up. But he still has to work in order to eat. So things are going to be difficult, but we just have to work through all the difficult times in order to acquire what we need. And God is going to bless us. Because God didn't say that the man would never eat again. Okay. He just said it's going to be more difficult to get your food. So therefore you have to put a better effort into what you're doing in order to get what you want. But God is still going to bless us to be able to get what we need. So therefore we going to go through the thorns of life. We're going to go through the thistles of life, right. But we're still going to get our food. And that's all, we have to put forth that work. We have to put forth that effort. Continue.
And the man called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living. And Yahweh God made for Adam and for his wife garments of skins and clothed them.
Because the fig leaves obviously were not enough. Yeah. They made fig leaves to cover themselves, but God said, no, you need clothes. That's another lesson. We need to wear clothes. Not a little bit of clothes, we need to wear clothes. Exactly. And he made garments of skin. We already spoke about the area that they're living in, and they're wearing garments of skin. So just because it gets hot doesn't mean that you wear less clothes. Because it's hot here, and they're wearing garments of skin. So clothes have to be worn. Now that we have the knowledge of good and evil in the earth, we have to have the knowledge of clothes as well. And that's what God said, those fig leaves that y'all made were not enough, and he actually clothed them. Continue.
And Yahweh God said, behold, the man is become as one of us, to know good and evil. And now, lest he put forth his hand and take also of the tree of life and eat and live forever. Therefore Yahweh God sent him forth from the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken.
So therefore, verse 23 lets us know once again that man was not made in the garden. Because it said that God took man out of the Garden of Eden to till the ground from whence he was taken. Exactly. So he's going back to his origin. Yes. So his job was only to till the garden. He messed up. Now he's going back to where he was created from, and now he has to work hard. Because everything in the garden was growing on his own. There was a mist going out of coming out of the earth to water the garden. Now he's going out of the garden where you actually have to work the ground in order to get something. But verse 22 is another controversial verse because it said, now, behold, the man has become as one of us, knowing good and evil. Mm-hmm. So now, lest he put forth his hand and take also the tree of life and eat and live forever. So now God is talking to someone saying that this man has to be taken out of the Garden of Eden lest he eats of the tree of life and live forever. Because God doesn't want us to have knowledge of good and evil and live forever. The earth will be in ruins, based on that. Us dying and living with good and evil is killing us. Imagine us living forever doing good and evil. The earth will not be able to survive like that. So God said that he had to make sure that man does not take of the fruit of the tree of life, eat of that, and live forever. So he took him out and put him to the land where he was taken from. Continue.
So he drove out the man, and he placed at the east of the Garden of Eden the cherubim and the flaming sword which turned every way to keep the way to the tree of life.
So now there's cherubim that was placed at the entrance of the Garden of Eden with the flaming sword which turned every way. So when it says God has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, then who could God be speaking to? The cherubim that he put to guard the entrance. Right. We're not getting our information anywhere else but what's already there. Right. God said he has become like one of us, knowing good and evil, and God put the cherubim at the entrance of the garden of good and evil to prevent man from going in. Pretty simple, pretty basic. Everything is written in the black and white, but we're focusing on the black, because that's what's the important part. Continue.
Chapter 4. And the man knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore Cain, and said, I have gotten a man with the help of Yahweh. And again she bore his brother Abel. And Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto Yahweh. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock and of the fat thereof. And Yahweh had respect unto Abel and to his offering, but unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And Yahweh said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth? And why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shall it not be lifted up? And if thou dost not well, sin coucheth at the door. And unto thee is its desire, but thou mayest rule over it.
So now let us know that after the man was taken out of the garden, him and his wife, now they start to have children. So now the first child that they have is Cain, or Quain as it's pronounced in Hebrew, because that means acquisition or possession. So that's why she said that I have gotten a man with the help of Yahweh. So Cain was the product of the man and the woman, and then now both of them had his brother, which is called Abel. So now they have jobs to do as well, because it wasn't just that Adam had to work for the rest of his life with the sweat off his brow, but the children had to work as well.
That's right.
But there were specific duties that each of the children had to do in order to make the household run properly. Just like today, you have a household, and each person in the household has a responsibility in order for the household to be successful. So now Abel was the keeper of the sheep, Cain was the tiller of the ground, because there were still animals roaming about, so someone had to make sure that the animals were taken care of, someone had to make sure that the ground was taken care of, so that everybody could survive. So now, out of what they took care of, they had the thought to give an offering to God, because they wanted to thank God for what they were able to produce and be successful at. Because we're still dealing with people that had a direct connection with the Most High.
That's right.
That we're dealing with people with that God spoke directly to. So they wanted to give thanks to God for what was given unto them. Just like today, when we work and when we acquire, when we get our checks, or whatever we receive, we're supposed to thank God. And we're supposed to be able to give an offering to God for what he has given us. And he's not asking for everything, because we need what we need in order to survive. But we're given of what was given unto us to give thanks unto God for what we're receiving. So they are taking of what was given to them and giving a portion unto God as thanksgiving for what was given unto them. But Cain's offering was not accepted.
Okay.
And there's a reason why his offering wasn't accepted, as God said, because he's not doing well. Okay. So it doesn't matter how much offerings you give to the Most High. If your ways are not good, God is not going to accept you. And that's what the lesson is here. He said that if you do, he said, why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If you do well, shall it not be lifted up? And if thou doest not well, sin coucheth at the door, and unto thee is his desire. But he's saying that we still have the ability to rule over sin.
Amen.
Sin is going to be there, because once the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil was taken, we know good and evil. But we have the ability to rule over the evil that may be within us. So Cain was of the type that he felt that he can do evil and still bring an offering to God and still be accepted. God is looking at our ways and not just the offering that we give. The offering that we give comes after us doing good. So we're giving thanks to God for what he's given us, but we have to do good also. Our ways have to be up to par in the sight of the Most High God, because that's what's most important. So Cain's offering was not accepted because his ways were not good. It had nothing to do with the type of offering he was bringing or anything else. God specifically told him that he has to do good, and then he will be accepted. Continue.
And Cain spoke unto Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel his brother and slew him.
And that wasn't the way to handle the situation. God told him that you have to do good.
That's it.
But Cain felt that if he got rid of the person that God is accepting, that maybe God would accept him instead. So Cain didn't take heed to the message that God was given. We have to take heed to the message that God has given us. So God is teaching us to do good. He's teaching us that we can rule over sin.
Right.
So we don't get rid of the people that God is accepting, thinking that that's going to make us a better person. God has enough love for everybody that does good. So one person is doing good, God will love that person. So if you see that God is blessing and taking care of a person that's doing good, then all you have to do is do good as well.
Right.
And God can bless you as well. So getting rid of that person, shunning that person, putting that person down, or doing anything to suppress what that person is doing doesn't make you a better person, especially in the sight of God. It may work amongst human beings because that's the way that we like to operate, but in the sight of God, getting rid of somebody that's doing good does not make you better in the sight of God. Continue.
And Yahweh said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And he said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground.
So there might be another lesson that Cain didn't learn, because maybe Adam didn't tell Cain that if God asks you a question, he already knows the answer. Right. Because when God was questioning Adam, God knew the answer. It's just that God was looking for the proper answer to come from Adam. So maybe if Cain heard that lesson, I'm pretty sure he knows his history. He probably knows why they're not inside the garden. Then he would know that if God is asking you a question, he already knows the answer, and you need to answer the question properly. So that's a lesson for us. If God ever speaks to anybody, answer properly, because God already knows the answer. So Cain didn't learn from that. He felt that by him killing or murdering his brother, burying him in the ground, that God would just not know where his brother is. So when he comes asking where he is, he gives a smart answer. I don't know. Yeah, that's a real smart answer. I mean, Adam and Eve did better jobs of answering God than Cain did. A much better job. He just said that, am I my brother's keeper? Yeah. Why you asking, why you asking me for? Yeah. It's like the song that's out there. Well, so people know the song, Mind Your Business. That's what Cain is basically saying to God. Because God asked him, where you from, where you going? He's asking questions, and Cain's response is, I don't know. I don't know. But God already knows the answer, so he answers Cain by saying this.
And now cursed art thou from the ground, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a wanderer shalt thou be in the earth.
So now this is the punishment that Cain received, because Adam's punishment was that the ground was cursed. Yes. When he works, he got to work hard. Thorns and thistles are going to come out, but he still has to work. Okay. Cain's punishment is the ground is still cursed, but when you work the ground, nothing's coming up. Not even thorns and thistles. So you definitely need somebody to help you. Because when you put your hand on something, you're not going to be successful at all. And Cain's response is this, which is not going to be that arrogant answer that he had before. Now his tone changes.
And Cain said unto Yahweh, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out of this day from the face of the land, and from thy face shall I be hid, and I shall be a fugitive and a wanderer in the earth. And it will come to pass that whosoever finds me will slay me.
So now he had an option. Be where your brother is, or just not be successful. So he had an option. So he's still alive, but he's saying that his punishment is more than he can bear. He's saying God has driven him from the face of the land, and he's going to be a fugitive and a wanderer, but he's still in a better position than Abel right now. So he should tone that down a little bit and just be thankful that God did not kill him for the fact that he murdered his brother. And he said that, he's worried about who's going to slay him, but you didn't worry about slaying your brother, but you worry about who's going to slay you. So that's the mind of an evil person. That no consideration for somebody else, but it's more concerned with what may happen to them. So these are the lessons that we have to extract from this. And these are things that we're learning from this, that even from the first human beings on earth, they're still making mistakes. So in 2018, we're going to make mistakes. But we have to learn from the mistakes that were made by other people and know that we have to have a certain respect for ourselves and respect for other people. We have to have consideration for ourselves and consideration for other people. And God, as we see here, punishes those who do the wrong. Punishment is not transferred from one person to another. Everybody that's doing wrong, God is punishing them directly. So that's why we say the serpent is a serpent, because the serpent was punished directly. Just like the man was punished, just like the woman was punished directly, everybody's receiving their punishment directly, because God is punishing those who do the wrong. Continue.
And Yahweh said unto him, therefore whosoever slayeth Cain, vengeance shall be taken on him sevenfold. And Yahweh set a sign for Cain, lest any finding him should smite him.
And that's where it ends when it talks about the sign. We don't know what the sign of Cain is, so we cannot speculate on what that sign is. But we know that there was a sign put on, or a sign given to Cain. Because it said that Yahweh set a sign for Cain. That's all we know. Whether it was on him, around him, we don't know. But there was a sign set for Cain so that people would know who Cain is, and they would know that if you kill Cain, punishment will be done unto you sevenfold. And that's as far as we go when it talks about the mark of Cain. Continue.
And Cain went out from the presence of Yahweh and dwelt in the land of Nod, on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch. And he builded a city and called the name of the city after the name of his son Enoch. And unto Enoch was born Irad. And Irad begot Mehujael. And Mehujael begot Metushael. And Metushael begot Lamech. And Lamech took unto him two wives. The name of one was Ada, and the name of the other Zillah. And Ada bore Yabal. He was the father of such as dwell in tents and have cattle. And his brother's name was Ubal. He was the father of all such as handle the harp and pipe. And Zillah, she also bore Tubal Cain, the forger of every cutting instrument of brass and iron. And the sister of Tubal Cain was Naamah.
So now we've seen one thing. We've seen the lineage that's coming from Cain, and we've also seen the progression of mankind. They teach us that there was a Bronze Age, Iron Age, and things like that, but it took time for mankind to figure out certain things. But now through reading the Holy Scriptures, we're seeing who it is that actually invented or discovered certain things. So the ages that they teach about, in school, we read about here in the Holy Scriptures. Yes. Then, and just shout out to Professor Yasuda, because she teaches anthropology, and we see, through anthropology they teach you, number one, that mankind was made in Africa. Well, I mean, mankind came out of Africa. Okay. That's a known fact throughout the world. Whether you read the Holy Scriptures or not, any school, whether they're racist or not, will tell you that mankind's origins is in Africa. Yeah, there's no, all of the oldest bones or oldest anything of a human being is always found in Africa, generally around Ethiopia. Yet, and they trace DNA going all the way back to somewhere in Africa. Even in the Europeans. Everybody traces their origin back to Africa, more specifically around what we know as Ethiopia. And also, because they say that the world is, a universe is millions of years old and things, we don't know about all those millions of years. We know through written history, there's about 6,000 years of written history. If you go through the chronology of mankind that we read here up until today, you're not going too much past 6,000 years. So what they're using to measure millions of years, we do know, but that is flawed in itself, because they try to use carbon dating, radio carbon dating, stuff like that, and all of that stuff is flawed. But when they trace, or when they chart one thing and say that something is a million years old, in order for something else that they discover to fit on that timeline, they have to say that that thing is a million years old also. So it's not like they're actually tracing anything concrete. They're just placing things in a timeline that they already created. So that's how you get to, when you learn certain stuff in school, they tell you about millions of years old and dinosaurs roamed 60 million years before mankind. But the Holy Scriptures teaches us that everything was created within those 6 days. So when they do the carbon dating only doesn't work the same on one element as it does in the other. And carbon dating only goes to a certain time frame. So they're guessing, when they tell you there's no, when you research carbon dating, it does not go to millions of years at all. There's a limit to how far you can test something with carbon dating. But what they do is just make up time frames and put that in the schools, and that's what we're learning. But when we actually check out the stuff that they're teaching us, we actually see the flaws in it. But through actual anthropology, you would see that mankind, we lived outside. So Adam and Eve were actually living outside, and it took a process of time. That's why you read about Jabal, who was the one that was dwelling in tents. Because it took a period of time that people said, I'm going to actually live indoors. So also that teaches us that if mankind was living in a certain region, that region had to be adequate for them to live outdoors. You're not living outdoors in Europe. That's right. So that, people moved, they migrated to Europe, but when they got to Europe, they had to find somewhere to live indoors. So we're dealing with people that were actually living outdoors. Then they were building cities. Cain built a city. People started dwelling in tents. People start to migrate. And when you're migrating with people and you're migrating with animals, you start to come up with inventions in order to migrate with the people and the animals. So now you have people living in tents. Now you want to make life joyful. Jubal is the inventor of music. And we all love music. Well, most of us love music. But music makes us feel good. So they invented instruments they wanted to play, because now that man is developing, inventions start to come about. So now you have Tubal Cain, who's the forger of instruments of brass and iron. So now you need tools, because if you're building cities, if you're making tents, you need to make instruments in order to construct these things. And now we see the progression of mankind, and we're just reading it through the lineage of Cain, but we see the progression of mankind and how technology is advancing. We may not call this technology, but back then, this is technology. Making a musical instrument back then is technology. Forming an instrument of brass and iron, that's technology. So they were impressed with the things that were being done then. We may not be impressed with it, but they were impressed with the inventions that were made at this time. Continue.
And Lamech said unto his wives.
I know you want to say Mech said unto his wives. I know that's what you want to say.
And
that's
Lamech
exactly when it.
his wives,
That's why you stuttering. And Mech said unto his wives. That's why you stuttering.
Ada and Zillah, hear my voice, ye wives of Lamech. Hearken unto my speech. For I have slain a man for wounding me, and a young man for bruising me. If Cain shall be avenged sevenfold, truly Lamech 70 and sevenfold.
So we just seen that even though you have a line of people that are making great inventions, you also have a line of people that are also forging a lot of evil, because he's saying that he's praising the fact that he killed somebody. So when we get to chapter 6, we start to see what type of evil was actually brewing in the earth, because he kills somebody, goes home and tells his wives, look what, he starts singing a song about it. Look what I did. I've slain a man for wounding me and a young man for bruising me. And there's sort of a rhyme to it when you actually read it, but he's actually praising the fact that he killed somebody. So we start to see that evil is starting to progress in the earth. Technology is progressing, but so is evil. And it's the evil that's going to cause the downfall of mankind. Continue.
And Adam knew his wife again, and she bore a son and called his name Seth. For God hath appointed me another seed instead of Abel, for Cain slew him. And to Seth, to him also there was born a son, and he called his name Enosh. Then began men to call upon the name of Jehovah.
And now within the timeline, we're still going back some, because it doesn't mean that Seth was born after all of these children or this lineage of Cain was made. It's just that you get the lineage of Cain, and now it's going back talking about Adam and Eve. So after Abel was killed or murdered, they had Seth, with Shet, which actually means replacement for for the son that they lost. So that's where you got the names Shet or Seth. And Seth had Enosh, and it said during this time that men began to call upon the name of Jehovah. Because throughout the line of Cain that we saw earlier, there's a lot of evil going on. So now we need, or the earth needs, a righteous lineage that's going to actually praise God. And through Enosh is when people start to praise God. Continue.
Chapter 5. This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him. Male and female created he them, and blessed them and called their name Adam. In the day when they were created, and Adam lived 130 years and begot a son in his own likeness after his image, and called his name Seth. And the days of Adam after he begot Seth were 800 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died.
So now this is another history that's being given. So even though we're reading one book, within this book, it contains a book that contains the history of Adam. Once again, that word toldo, which is translated, it's properly translated to generations, but when it talks about the heavens and the earth, the word history would also be a better term there. So it's talking about the history of Adam. And he says, in the day that God created man, in the likeness of God made he him, which we already spoke about in chapter 1. And it said, male and female, he created them and blessed them, and he called their name Adam, or called their name man. So when we talk about human beings, God made both male and female. So that's where you get the term, we're human beings, because God made us. And in that day he created us, and in the day he created them. So now it said that Adam lived to 130 years, and that's when he begot Seth. So in the chapter prior, a lot of time took place. So when Adam and Eve had Cain and Abel, and then they grew up, as it mentioned here in verse, the one that says they had sons and daughters. Verse 4, and in the days of Adam after he begot Seth were 800 years, and he begot sons and daughters. Cain, Abel, and Seth were not the only children that Adam and Eve had. Those are the only ones that the history is speaking about, but they had other sons and daughters. So when Cain says, when anybody that finds me will slay me, he's talking about the other children that Adam and Eve had. And because they grew up. So Adam and Eve, because God told them initially, be fruitful and multiply. So that was the other job that they had. After they were removed from the Garden of Eden, they had to till the ground, and they're filling the earth by having children. So we're only reading a story or a history that's talking about Cain and Abel, and then the lineage of Cain, but Adam and Eve had sons and daughters. So that's where all of these people came from. So that's where their wives came from. Their wives are actually, at this point, their sisters. So that's why we don't need other books to try to tell us that there were other creations. God made the first man and the first woman, and they populated the earth. That's why Adam says that she is the mother of all living. There's no other group of human beings that ever existed that did not come from Adam and Eve, because she's the mother of all living. Going back to the mitochondrial DNA, when they trace it from any human being, it goes back to one person. They don't know who that person is, but the mitochondrial DNA is what they trace for a female lineage, and the Y chromosomes is what they test for a male lineage. So there's a term which is called the mitochondrial Eve and the Y chromosomal Adam. Because in all human beings, the Y chromosome in every body traces to one person. And for every individual, the mitochondrial DNA goes back to one person. So through science, they teach that everybody on earth came from one man and one woman. But we know that just by reading our history here. But we could take the history that we read here, attach it to what we learned there, and put it all together. And we don't really need this science to explain this, but people may need this to explain their science.
Right.
And that's why we need to study both. Because once again, everything points back to one man and one woman. Science teaches us that. Science and anthropology teaches that mankind started in Africa and then they migrated out. All of it teaches us that people lived outside, then they started as a progression of time, start to build homes where they could live in, start to build cities. We're reading that through a history. We could learn that in school, but we're reading that in the history here. So there's, all of those fantasies that they're teaching us in other books about, once again, Lilith and all these other human beings that were made. God made one man and one woman, and they populated the entire earth. So this chapter goes on to a certain lineage. It's going to talk about Seth and his, he may have sons and daughters, how long he lived. Enosh, Canaan, Mahalalel, Jared. Go to verse 21.
And Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begot Methuselah 300 years and begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him.
And all we know is that Enoch disappeared. And then say Enoch went up into heaven, because we already dispelled the notion that heaven is not an alternative place where people can live. You can't walk around heaven. So Enoch didn't go to heaven. God took him because when you just look at the timeline of what's happening during this time, we see the timeline of the flood about to approach. Right. When we see the timeline, if you calculate the age of Methuselah, who was Enoch's son, Methuselah died in the flood. When you go by the ages, you count everything as 1,656 years from Adam to the flood. Methuselah died in that 1,656 year of mankind. So what God did was remove Enoch so that he would not be one of those that died in the flood. Because he was, as it said, that he walked with God. So if Enoch is walking with God, God is not going to have Enoch fall to the same destruction as other evil people are. So therefore, he took him. So it doesn't mean that he went somewhere else. He also died, but it's given a terminology that God took him away from the evil that was in the earth at that time. This chapter is just giving a genealogy. When you take the genealogy and calculate the years, you see what's about to happen. So God took Enoch out of the midst of all of the evil that was happening during this time. And Enoch doesn't have a book. Because we went through Genesis, we went to Deuteronomy, we're back to Genesis again. We're going through the history of, we did the history of the prophets. We're going to do Daniel today. But the book of Enoch does not appear in history until years later. So when people are reading the book of Enoch for information, it's a fairy tale.
Right.
Exactly.
We have comic books today. Don't think that people didn't write comic books back in the days. People had time to write, just like people wrote, they make up X-Men, they make up Avengers, they make up all types of, don't think that life was all nonfiction. Don't think that people just read nonfiction all their life. People wrote fictional books as well. Just because you find a book and it's titled with the name of somebody that exists in the Holy Scriptures doesn't make that book a nonfiction book. People wrote fiction then Shakespeare wrote fiction. People don't find Shakespeare and believe that all that stuff actually happened. So why, when people find books of Enoch and other books that were never canonized, they start to believe it? And it never, in the Holy Scriptures, we read about this happened and it's referred to in the book of the Wars of Yahweh. This was spoken about, in the Chronicles of the Kings. We never read anywhere it says, and this was spoken about in the book of Enoch. So why are we referring to the book of Enoch that the Holy Scriptures never refers to? That was not found or not constructed until generations. It's not even in the Apocrypha.
No.
Apocrypha is books that people did not want to canonize in the Holy Scriptures. And Enoch is not even in there. So therefore, if Enoch is not even in books that they didn't want in the Holy Scriptures, why are we trying to include it in the Holy Scriptures that people didn't even put anywhere? That was not originally written in Hebrew at all. People wrote it in Hebrew later on, but its origin is not Hebraic at all. No. So all of that fantasy that we read about in the book of Enoch was actually that. It was fantasy. Because people did write fictional books for enjoyment. Continue. No, go into
28 or straight
6. 28, so we could get an introduction. Yeah, because we're going to talk about Noah.
Verse 28. And Lamech lived 182 years and begot a son. And he called his name Noah, saying, this same shall comfort us in our work and in the toil of our hands, which cometh from the ground which Jehovah hath cursed. And Lamech lived after he begot Noah 595 years, and he begot sons and daughters. And all the days of Lamech was 777 years, and he died. And Noah was 500 years old, and Noah begot Shem, Ham, and Japheth.
Well, very important people that we need to know about, and just to also talk about Chief Uziel's lesson for next week, since part of this lesson was already taught during the Haftarah. So, but also as an assignment, people are going to look up Shem, Ham, and Japheth and see what nations came out of them. So when Chief Uziel speaks about it next week, everybody's in tune and everything. So when he doesn't need his slides because everybody would actually know what information that he's about to bring forth. But during the time you see a lot of evil was happening, so when Noah is born, and Noah is the actual pronunciation in Hebrew, that means rest. Right. So when Lamech named his son Noah, it's because of the discomfort that was happening in the earth. So he said, let me name this child Noah, because he saw something in that child, figuring that this was the one that's going to give them comfort, because everybody realized that Jehovah has cursed the ground. Evil is sprouting throughout the earth, and everybody has to work hard to get something out of the ground. So they figured that this time, that this person would give them comfort for the ground that Jehovah has cursed. Continue.
Chapter
6.
And it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair. And they took them wives whomsoever they chose.
And here comes another controversy. Because it said the sons of God saw the daughters of men that were fair, and they took them wives whomever they chose. Mm-hmm. Now, some of the information that we have of the sons of God are who? Fallen angels. Giants. Children of giants. That room could participate as well. Giants. Fallen angels, giants. That's pretty much what we've been taught. But none of that information is actually what we read. No. What we know is that humans beget humans. Yeah. So if the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were fair, took them wives from whoever they chose and went into them, they couldn't be, if the sons of God were fallen angels, they couldn't produce children. That's right. Because God made humans to beget after their kind. That's right. So therefore the sons of God had to be human beings. That's right. And it's just a terminology that these were righteous men. Right. God called Israel his son. God called King David his son. So the sons of God were just righteous individuals. Nothing spooky, but these are righteous individuals that chose the wrong mates, which is lessons that we should learn. That we had to choose the right mates, male or female. That righteous women should be marrying righteous men. That if a righteous woman marries an unrighteous man, things are going to fall apart. If a righteous man marries an unrighteous woman, things are going to fall apart. And that's exactly what happened here. The sons of God saw the daughters of men, they just looked upon the outward appearance and took wives of whomever they chose. They didn't choose properly. Continue.
And Jehovah said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for that he also is flesh. Therefore shall his days be 120 years. The Nephilim were in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bore children to them, the same were the mighty men that were of old, the men of renown.
So it explains exactly who the sons of God are right there. Because it said that they bore children, and the same were mighty men that were of old, the men of renown. So the sons of God were men of renown. Once again, just keeping it straight to the text, that the men of renown took women from whom they chose, bore children, but now evil is starting to propagate in the earth because they're choosing the wrong mates. And now God is saying that his spirit cannot abide with man forever because man is flesh. He doesn't want. That's why chapter 5 is important also, because it's giving you the length of time that people are living. Yes. People are living 700, 800, 900 years. Yes. That's 700, 800, 900 years of evil in the earth. Yes. So God is saying that, and now the earth is being populated. So now God is saying that this cannot exist forever. So he gives man 150 years to change up, else he's going to cause destruction. So it's not that man's lifespan is going to cut at 120. No. The time frame that God is speaking now up until the flood is 120 years. So even with all of that, God is still being merciful because he's giving mankind 100. I mean, we don't have 120 years to get it together. We may not have 120 days to get it together, but God has gave mankind 120 years to figure it out. And as the story goes, we didn't figure it out with all the time that God gave us. And it said the Nephilim were in the earth in those days. Nephilim is not the translation for giants. No. Nephal is fall. So and that doesn't mean that they fell from heaven because based on chapter 1, nobody was actually living in heaven. So nobody fell from heaven. These are people whose character has fallen. So these are evil people because they have fallen you may have fallen from grace inside of God, but you didn't fall out of heaven. So the Nephilim does not mean giants. It's people of fallen character that they start to, fill up the earth in these days. And God is not going to allow these people of fallen character to continue on to live on his earth. Continue.
And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented Yahweh that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. And Yahweh said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the earth, both man and beast and creeping thing and fowl of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. And
now that term or the word repent is actually a mistranslation because people would always point to Numbers where it says that God says he is not a man that he should lie, nor the son of man that he should repent. So, but it's a different word in the Hebrew here than the Hebrew there. But they translate both as repent because we want to also show that there is no contradiction in the Holy Scriptures. So the translation here is improper. It's not repent. But God felt sorrowful that he made man. We know God knows the future. So God already knew that what mankind was going to become, and he knew what he was going to do. But it doesn't mean that God is not going to feel bad about what he's about to do. Because God doesn't take pleasure in killing human beings. Death came about because Adam ate the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, but God doesn't have delight in killing people. So therefore, he felt sorrowful of what he's about to do. But as he says, he's going to blot out man that he has created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, because everything has become corrupt at this point. Think about today and the corruption that's happened in the world today, and think about what corruption could have possibly been happening at that time. So if anybody thinks that God needs to destroy the world today, just imagine how much evil was happening at that time when God actually destroyed mankind off the face of the earth. But in all of that, it's the final verse that we're going to read says this.
But Noah found grace in the eyes of Yahweh. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. So in the time of evil, we have to find grace in the sight of Yahweh as well. So we ask that the Most High God would continue to teach us, that he would give us knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, that he would allow us to be able to make progress in our lives, progress in his sight, become successful, obtain knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. So with that, I say Shabbat Shalom to Kim.
Shabbat Shalom to Kim.